The following podcast is offered freely through the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and by Jonathan Foust. To learn more or to make a donation to support this work, please go to www.jonathanfoust.com. Have you heard the spring peepers yet? Last night, my wife and I, in the evening, we walk in a meadow at the edge of a park. And at the bottom of the meadow, there's this marshy area. And the peepers are out full blast. And the peeper orchestra is quite fascinating. And whenever we would go walk around, they'd be loud, then they would hear us walk in, they'd slowly get quiet, then we'd wait, and then the orchestra would pick up again. And I was listening to this amazing sound and looking forward to the experience in the future. And I remembered that it was going to go down to 28 that night. And I said, these guys are going to freeze tonight. And it sort of shifted from sort of this kind of horrific sense of like, this which I'm enjoying won't be here tomorrow, to realizing it and just experiencing the delicacy of this amazing symphony. Here it is, and gone tomorrow. That's a little bit of what I'd like to talk about tonight, about impermanence and the nature of suffering that forms in relationship to impermanence, and the inquiry into your true nature, who you truly are in the midst of this play. The impermanence of those peepers was all the more exquisite because I knew it was only there for a night. So I thought I would do a little research. This is a topic, that's pretty well known, the 3 characteristics of reality. But I thought, well, you know what, let me see what's out there. So I typed in the 3 characteristics of reality into Google. And number 4 was a talk called The 3 Characteristics of Reality by Jonathan Foust. I saw that and I thought, do you ever need further proof than everything you seek is found within? I mean, there it is. But I'll offer you a promise. If you can remember the 3 things that I'm going to talk about tonight, your suffering will decrease dramatically. And when you forget these things, your suffering increases, sometimes dramatically. So what I'd like to talk about is about impermanence, how everything that's born out of causes and conditions is subject to change. Reality number 1. Reality number 2 of dukkha, or the stress or suffering that arises. Anything you resist or cling to will result in some form of stress, dissatisfaction, or suffering. Second characteristic. And the 3rd characteristic of anatta, sometimes translated literally as not self, which we can think of as you're not what you think. Who are you beyond your body, your conditioning, your beliefs, your habits? What is that? And I'd like to talk a little bit about how to practice. How do we remember these 3 things when we most need to? And part of what we'll do over the next 40 minutes or so will be some short meditations, just to sort of try on some practices that are associated with these teachings. So this first set of impermanence, everything is destined to change. I was thinking about this nature of impermanence, and I just flashed on a memory at a yoga conference I went to decades ago. And there was a form of yoga. I wandered into the class, and it's called Mysore Yoga. And it's a style of yoga that's very, very intense. And you work individually on your own stuff with a teacher there. And they do a lot of the deep, intense, asana flows. And I never walked in. The guy said, "Okay, we'll do 30 sun salutations." I had never done more than 30, say, in a year. And so I realized why they called it Mysore Yoga. It's like afterward you're going, "Oh my God, am I sore?" But I noticed there was this lack of joy in this class. It was so grim. And I heard someone say to someone else, "Yeah, look at her, it takes 3 years to learn that posture." So I was looking at this and thinking I really don't care that much. But then I realized that part of the intensity was the people practicing were so frightened of their mortality. There was really this sense of, if I do these practices right, I'm not going to get sick, I'm not going to get old, and I'm not going to die. I am going to die. And that's really the essence of the clutch we go through life in many ways. It's just that very fundamental clutch around holding on to what we have and the fear of losing what we have. So this characteristic of impermanence, I'd like to lead a short meditation on this, if you like. This will just be about 3 minutes. Just let your eyes close and feel the breath. A wonderful way to explore this theme of awareness of impermanence is through the doorway of sound. Just notice the sounds that are the closest to you, the sounds the furthest away. And you may notice how the sounds are completely beyond your control. And you cannot hear better by trying harder. There can be a sense of receiving the sounds as they're happening. And just for these next few moments, sense as intimately as you can the experience of the sound and the space that's holding the sound. Imagine just as sounds arise, are sustained and fall away, so are sensations and thoughts. And for a few moments, take this time to look for anything in your experience that does not change. And you might now just gently deepen the breath. And you can remain with your eyes closed if you like, or you can open your eyes. One of the aspects of the Buddha's teachings that I appreciate so deeply is he would say repeatedly, "Do not believe a word of what I'm telling you, but see if this is true." When we, as far as I can tell, when I look closely, anything that's born out of causes or conditions changes. Remembering this can be very helpful. this is an understanding of just the nature of things. When a leaf falls to the ground, it's the mulch for those crocuses I saw this morning coming up. So one of the teachings in my understanding of Buddhism is this teaching of the middle way. That even though everything is changing, it is not nihilism, that nothing matters, everything is meaningless, nor is it some kind of magical thinking of eternalism, that everything goes on. It's more of a scientific observation. If you might just for a moment take a look at your hands, just as a little reflection. And just sense if you can remember your hands when they were, let's say, 10 years old. And just sense how your hands have changed. One of my favorite lines from Ram Dass, who speaks so beautifully about getting older and going through the process of coming to terms with your mortality. He talked about this ad that says, so was someone's hands, and it said, someone calls these aging spots, I call them ugly. And Ram Dass said, well, what I say is, some call these ugly, I call them aging spots. When you look at your thoughts, are there any that are permanent, that aren't changing? 60,000 thoughts a day. Your beliefs is what you believed 10 years ago, what you still believe. Your moods and emotions, how many different moods have you had today? Even states of consciousness, they're always changing and in flux. It's described as a stream, as a waterfall of just changing phenomena. Recognizing the stream, recognizing impermanence is a major part of waking up. And what it leads to is deep insights into your particular relationship to change. Because how you relate to what is changing has immediate impact on your happiness or lack of happiness. So we're dealing with change all the time. I don't know why this story popped into mind, but it does tie in a little bit. It's the story of this elderly man is sitting in the living room, and a little boy comes out, his youngest granddaughter comes out and says, Grandpa, can you make the sound of a frog? And he said, well, no, I can't. So she kind of wandered back into the kitchen, and the second oldest comes out a little bit later and says, hey, Grandpa, would you make the sound of a frog for me? He said, no, I can't. And why are you asking? That child wanders back, and the next child comes out and says, hey, Grandpa, could you make the sound of a frog? He said, no. He said, what is going on? He said, well, Mom just said that after you croak, we can go to Disneyland. So there's some very different relationships to change there. So here's what the Buddha said. Since all things are impermanent, nothing in the physical world or the mind can bring lasting satisfaction. Thus lies the stress experienced by those that are not fully awake. So when we believe that long-term satisfaction is going to come from externals, we may be in for a surprise. And the very nature of waking up is seeing how you relate to reality. the instinct to either protect and push away, or the instinct to grab and to hold on. And the degree to which you do that has impact. So part of the practice of meditation is just noting, it's labeling, it's just seeing what goes by. And the practice of noting or labeling can be quite interesting because you're actually literally naming thinking, feeling, emotion. So it's an interesting practice. I find it kind of irritating after a while, but it's pretty powerful. But the analogy I've loved is, imagine someone is saying to you, okay, stand on the street corner and just notice the cars going by. Just name the cars as they go by. So you're standing there like Chevrolet Impala, Corvette, oh, an old Volkswagen like the one I had in college. God, I love that car. It was amazing. I wonder where that car is right now. Meanwhile, another 50 cars have gone by. So there's an element of concentration in the practice of seeing clearly, just able to name what is there, which is an important part. But there's another element as well, is the empathy and the compassion that is required when we find ourselves caught. Because it's only the empathy and the compassion that will allow us to let go. When we have an understanding of the nature of dukkha, that it is in relationship to how we're holding anything, it can change our relationship to life. There's a story of a kind of an old classic teaching story of a devotee of a guru who made this beautiful, beautiful clay vase, put a huge amount of work into it, and gave it as an offering to this teacher. And the teacher loved it, and he marveled at it, the work and the dedication, and how much he was touched by it. And they set the vase to the side, and other people were giving gifts. And at one time, a wind came through, and it knocked the vase over, and it broke the vase. And the devotee said, "I'm so sorry about the vase." And the guru said, "It was already broken." Remembering that can be helpful. It's been said that all fear at its root is a fear of death. It's a fear of that fundamental identification with an I that's doing something. But it's not only the falling away of form of the body, but the story, the narrative of everything and everyone you love. That's a deep grip. When we can not resist that fact, there can be a sense of freedom. Carlos Castaneda famously talked about having death on your left shoulder. Keep death as your advisor for every decision you have to make. Because there's wisdom, deep wisdom in that. And I notice that at the times when I may feel an acceptance about all of that, in that unwinding, my life opens up a little bit more. I start to relax a little bit more, and I notice I become more generous. Like I'm just truly starting to enjoy myself. Some very interesting stories of some people, certainly not all people, but some people, when they realize they're terminal, that their time is limited, there's sometimes a deep relaxation. Now I can put down the burden and be present. Not all the time. But I find the more I can unwind that and rest in that deep appreciation of what is here, how it's changing, and not trying to control it, that sense of presence is wonderful, and I always find myself loving this quote by E.B. White. You may know this one. He says, "I wake up each day torn between a desire to serve the world and to savor it. This makes it difficult to plan the day." So how do you plan your day when you know your body's going to die on some unknown schedule? And this is one that leads to the third characteristic of reality, that in some ways is very complex, at its essence is more simple than simple could be. And that is this inquiry into anatta, of not self, of who and what you truly are. And this is how the Buddha described it, two analogies. One was the example of a chariot, like a wagon that would be pulled by a horse or by an oxen. He would talk about how the chariot is a collection of parts. The wheels unto themselves are not a chariot, the axle is not a chariot, the carriage is not a chariot, but collectively we call it a chariot. In that same way, the word forest is a convenient way to call a collection of trees. But one individual tree is not a forest. So, who are you? You could say that you're a collection of parts. You're the physical body. You are the feeling of those sensations. You're the thoughts and the perception of that. You're the habits that arise out of that. And you're the attitudes that arise out of that. That collection of parts is something that makes up what we call you. But then further inquiry requires you have to ask yourself, are any of those parts enduring? So perhaps we can do a little meditation on this, a short reflection on this. You might just again close your eyes and feel the breath. And just take a moment to anchor your attention in the here and now, the breath or sounds or the felt sense. Take a moment to notice what is changing. Breath, sound, sensation. And as you sense the body, as you sense who you are as perception, of who you are as thinking, whatever you're believing, is there anything here that is unchanging? Here is what the Buddha said. Corporality and the body is transient. Feeling is transient. Perception is transient. Mental formations are transient. Consciousness is transient. And that which is transient is subject to suffering. And that which is transient and subject to suffering and change, one cannot rightly say, this belongs to me. This am I. This is the self. Therefore, whatever there is of the body, of feeling, of perception, of mental formations or consciousness, whether past, present, or future, one's own or external, gross or subtle, lofty or low, far or near, one should understand according to reality and true wisdom. This does not belong to me. This is not myself. And can you imagine for a moment, as you again relax with the breath, this quality of non-grasping mind, allowing your experience to be exactly what it is right now. You might deepen your breath. And feel free to remain with your eyes closed, or if you like, you can let your eyes open. So how is this teaching or this inquiry into no self helpful? I notice that when I'm defending myself, I'm tight, I'm protective, I'm more combative. When I have that sense of that teaching that nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine, when I can sense that sometimes, I feel an openness, I feel a sense of deep gratitude and appreciation. I feel more creative and I feel more generous. One of the side byproducts of mindfulness and the practice is a heightened sense of empathy. As you become more sensitive to your own experience of how you hold your life, as you let go of that which is no longer true or needed in your life, there's a quality of wisdom that arises, but also a quality of compassion. Because compassion is the only way to truly let go. And in that, there is a heightened awareness of other. It cannot be that you couldn't be more sensitive and also be more sensitive and aware of the other. I find when I'm in that state, I have much more of a heightened sense of the other's experience, a sense of the other's unmet need, or just sensing who they are. And that's sort of the spark of bodhicitta, of awake to what is, and the heart arising to meet it. It's wonderful when it happens, and it's not all the time. But it's about opening up our bandwidth to life. One description of mindfulness, which I've mentioned before, the practice of breath-based meditation, anapanasati. The word sati means remembering. So there's a quality of how you can live your life so you are more prone to remember that, yes, all things change. My relationship to what is changing is a determination of my happiness. And as I explore what it means to hold nothing as me and mine, what happens then? So we have to remind ourselves, and that's where having a daily practice, that's where having like-minded people is so helpful. Coming to practice and sit together for me is one of the, as good as it gets on the planet, having this collective shared inquiry. But it's also remembering when you're in your experience and experiencing pain or suffering. Just remembering the words that can make a happy person sad and a sad person happy. This too shall pass. There's a story of a woman who lost her child in the Buddha's time. And she went to him and said, you're a miracle worker. You bring my child back to life. And the Buddha said, if you can find a household that death has not touched, come back and I'll bring your child back to life. And so, out of her love for her son, she went on this quest and visited every home to find a home where death had never touched. And when she returned deeply wise and deeply compassionate. Why don't we close with a short meditation? We'll do a little reflection on these practices. Just gently let your attention come into your breath. And take a moment to reflect on the immediate experience of impermanence in the world of the senses. As you explore sound, touch, taste, smell, feeling, sight. For this next minute or so, just simply rest with the awareness of what is changing, sensing who you are as the observer or the witness. One aspect of practice is noticing what is happening while it's happening. Any sense door or a combination of sense doors, just have them as your anchor, your primary focus. Holding that in the foreground and sensing everything that is changing in the background. A second quality of attention is, in addition to noticing what is happening while it's happening, to notice your relationship to what is happening. Just to notice if there is the slightest inclination of the mind to move toward grasping or holding, or toward aversion and pushing away. Notice what is changing. Notice how you're holding your experience. And you might inquire if you were to allow your experience to be exactly as it is, to actively consent to whatever spontaneously arises. And taking this next few moments to contemplate the following phrase: nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I and mine. As you inquire into this, what do you feel? What do you notice? You may find it helpful as a little vehicle to sense this quality of anatta, of open awareness, by again noticing the sounds around you. And sense in your own way the silence behind the sounds. Rest in that presence. In your own time, gently deepening the breath. And as you're ready, letting your eyes open or remaining with them closed. When things are changing in our life and we don't want them to, there is a friction through the body-mind matrix. When things aren't changing and we want them to, there's an equal degree of stress, and internal fire, or dissatisfaction. When we defend our beliefs, our thoughts, when we hold on tight, there's a certain degree of tension and tightness and heat. When we remember that everything is changing, that one day your worst enemy will die, when we remember how our experience is infused with impermanence, there can be an opening. When we begin to see and get more sensitive to the burn, to the feedback from the universe that indicates we're out of balance, called suffering, it can more quickly heighten our awareness of the recognition of anicca and dukkha. And when we come to terms and come to peace with that, there's a natural opening of the mind to who we are beyond the body, who we are beyond our beliefs and our story. That can be a frightening inquiry, but it can also be a liberating inquiry, because we know that when you let go a little bit, there's a little bit of space, a little bit of freedom. And when you let go a lot, there's a lot of space and a lot of freedom. The inquiry into awareness itself is a delicate practice of meditation, because there's usually a doer, and it's about the suspending of doing. It's sometimes called non-meditation. It's a practice of non-manipulation, of just truly resting in presence and allowing your experience to flow. And I find that just those moments of hearing the sounds and sensing the silence behind the sounds is a little indicator of that quality of open awareness. One of my favorite readings, the birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. So I think oftentimes there's a fear of what is beyond this letting go. And the Tibetans have a wonderful way of describing it, that what we are seeking is closer than you can imagine. It's easier than you can imagine. And it's more wondrous than you can imagine. This quality, as is described as the infinite realms of awareness and the infinite qualities of embodiment of the heart, the infinite quality of kindness for yourself and others, for compassion for yourself and others, for joy for yourself and others, and for equanimity, for steadiness in the midst of everything and everything that can change. Those are part of the qualities that arise in this letting go. Thank you so much for your kind listening. Remembering these qualities has helped me in my life quite a bit. If you'd like to be on the mailing list, you can sign up in the back. We have tea and cookies, something to experiment grasping with on your way out. And as always, thank you for your generous support for the class and the church and myself. May you and reality have a wonderful evening and beyond. I'll see you next week. Thank you.